Alrighty, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. We've got about 23 people that are dialed in. We've got about we have 5 people that are in as panelists. And so this is the first time that we've ever done this sort of virtual meetup, kind of brought to us by unique circumstances. But hopefully it goes over well and is a format that can work for us for the foreseeable future. So we can still kind of light candles and whatnot. So anywho, to kick things off, I just want to say thanks to our sponsors. We've got first up, Savah Group. They have been with us really since the start, since I started organizing this group. And they're helping us out with logistics and a lot of the planning and the social media coordination and everything that goes into putting these events on. Also, we've got Cypress. If you are familiar with Selenium or any sort of automated testing, and you're not already using Cypress, you should definitely check it out. It's really sort of next generation awesomeness with test automation. And then we've got Wrangle. So Wrangle joined us as a sponsor and then recently renewed. So we're glad to have them. Also want to take a moment to thank all of our organizers who make all of this happen. So we've got Nikki, Wendy, Rachel, Toby, and Amir that kind of all work together to schedule things, to get the speakers lined up, to make sure that we tweet this out, to make sure that we have Zoom webinar accounts and all that stuff necessary to make this happen. So thank you all for doing that. So tonight's presentation is done by some folks at AudioEye. I will kick it over to them in just 2 seconds. But since the 2 talks are going to kind of like converge together a little bit, we're going to start, well, actually, before we dive into the actual talk, we're going to start with the JavaScript news. So Rachel, do you want to share that with us?
Yeah, I do. And I've also shared in a chat a link to the JavaScript newsletter, so you can click and get all the links to these. Just to start with basic JavaScript, informational article on aborting a signal. So often we find ourselves making calls, but based off of certain user interactions or other reasons, we may no longer need the information that call is doing. So it's nice to be able to talk to your database and say, stop this asynchronous action. So this article goes into that. And then for Angular, 6 ways to unsubscribe from observables in Angular. So for those who are familiar with observables, which I hope you are by now, because I put an article about them in every single newsletter, observables can have memory leaks if you subscribe and then you don't unsubscribe from them. Even if you destroy, let's say, a component in which they live, there's going to be a memory leak. So unsubscribing to them is very important. And this gives kind of 6 different strategies to manage that canceling of the subscription. And then the next one, 10 things every Angular developer should know about Zone.js. So Zone.js is kind of the, I don't know if backbone of the framework is, but it is where the framework lives in Angular. And you find yourself butting against it, particularly when you're working with third-party libraries or something that may not be Angular specific. So highly recommend reading that. In React news, a cheat sheet for using TypeScript. So TypeScript and React is not as tightly coupled, but I still think it's a great thing to use in your projects. And if you are in React, there's certain patterns to make it easier. And then lastly, a comparison of Flutter versus React versus native and React Native, and just general performance review. Honestly, I don't know how reliable these things are. Scenario, but I do think that the general, a general look at how different frameworks affect performances on different devices is good to kind of have in the back of your head, but I'll take them with a grain of salt because they are not typically realistic real world scenarios. But that's it for the JavaScript news.
Cool. Thanks so much, Rachel. So yeah, I guess a couple things too before we kick things off. So since this is a Zoom webinar, the panelists are the ones that have the ability to talk. However, everybody else that is joined as an attendee can participate in a couple of different ways. So one is there is a raise hand button, which can draw attention to yourself. Then there's also a Q&A section. So if you type your question, that will show to the panelist or the presenter, whoever's speaking, and they can either answer it verbally, answer it via text, or they also have the ability to allow an attendee to talk. So, I guess I just apologize in advance if there are any sort of speed bumps, but if you do have any questions, definitely please do post them in the chat or in the Q&A, or just incessantly raise your hand. I don't know if that's actually going to help though. So chat and Q&A. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Lyndon and Sarah to kind of kick things off.
Great, thanks, Randall. Appreciate it, and thanks for having us. So my name is Lyndon Dunbar. I'm a digital accessibility specialist with AudioEye. I work on the QA side of things, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. She can introduce herself, and she's going to talk about some of the business side benefits of accessibility.
Yeah, hi, Lyndon. Hi, everybody. I see a lot of pretty familiar faces out there, so I know a few of you out there. Thanks for joining. I was a special education teacher for 14 years before going into tech, and I went through the Georgia Tech boot camp. And now I work for AudioEye. I'm a junior implementation developer. So basically what that means is that I fix code all day long. I'm a certified professional accessible core competencies, certified by the IAAP. And I'm going to probably sit for the web accessibility specialist exam in April, depending on if coronavirus lets me. So real quick first, let's just check that everybody knows how to raise your hand in Zoom, because we want to try to make this pretty interactive. We're going to do our best. So if you can raise your hand if you are wearing slippers right now. Yeah, oh, I see a bunch. All right, good job. All right, now just raise your hand if you are a person. So I can see, yeah, there we go. We got lots of people on here, not too many robots, good. All right, awesome. If you have not been able to raise your hand, down at the bottom of your screen, there should be there's a participants panel. If you open that up, you should be able to see the chat and the participants panel. It's either one of those. I'm on a different screen than you guys as a panelist, but it should be down at the bottom. I think it's at the bottom of the chat screen. Nope, it's at the bottom of the participant screen. So you should have a little icon down there that says to raise hand. So thanks for everybody who raised their hands. If you, because we are all about accessibility here, if you're a keyboard only user and you want to raise your hand on Windows, Alt-Y. Try Alt-Y if you're on Windows. If you're on Mac, try Option-Y. So you can toggle your hand raise on Zoom with Alt-Y or Option-Y. And I'm going to go right now. I'm putting a link in here for all of the keyboard shortcuts for Zoom.
We might want to mention real quick. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is London. I just wanted to mention real quick that if you want to type in the chat, you can do Alt-H on Windows or Command-Shift-H on Mac.
Yep. So I see a question after you raise your hand, will the moderator enable your audio video temporarily? I believe that I think I might have that capability. I may not be able to do that.
Yeah, if you hover over the attendee with their raised hand, it should have a button that says allow to talk.
I've just got a button that says chat. So I think because I'm not the host.
Okay, well, yeah,
okay.
I have that button. So if you need somebody to talk, just let me know.
Yeah, we can do that. All right. So real quick, let's talk about 3 things I didn't know about accessibility, and we're going to just test our hand raising skills. So raise your hand if you know what a skip to main content link is. I did not know this coming out of bootcamp. All right, so we got a few. We got some. Good. All right, put your hand down if you didn't know that when you started coding. All right, so we got a few. When you came out of school, you didn't know that. Okay, we got a few. All right, how about heading structure? Who used to style their headings? I'm gonna say used to style their headings with, by changing it from an H1 to an H2 to an H3 to an H4 to an H5, and didn't style their headings with CSS instead, because they just said, oh, this heading level looks prettier as an H3, I'm gonna change it that way. If you did that at any point in time, raise your hand. Okay, so there's another accessibility no-no we'll talk about. What about, okay, put your hands down again. What about decorative alt text? Who here puts alt text on every single image on their page? Okay, we got a few. Who puts alt text on 0 images on your page, or you don't even know what alt text is? Okay, good. We don't have too many of those. All right. Who puts a null alt on decorative images? All right, not too many. Okay, so we're gonna talk about that too. All right, well, let's real quick first, let's just touch on business benefits of accessibility. One of the big ones is SEO. Fixing accessibility will generally help your SEO, but it may not go the other way around. So things that help your SEO that are big accessibility, big pieces of accessibility, semantic HTML, gonna help your SEO. Content ordering, landmark regions, appropriate header elements, image alts, video transcription, text size and color contrast, captions, sitemaps, breadcrumbs, link text, appropriate link text. All of those things help your SEO. They're great reasons to make sure that your website is accessible. Another business benefit of, there is not a slide screen that should be visible. We're going to share screens in a minute. Thanks, Homer, for asking. Some other business benefits, because this is just real quick. Yeah, thanks, Homer. Some other business benefits are that your website is going to be available to a wider audience. There are 61 million adults roughly in the United States that have disabilities. They all have friends, they all have family. That comes out to hundreds of billions of dollars in disposable income in the United States, over $1 trillion in the world, disposable income. That's just extra money lying around to be used. You want a piece of that. But beyond that, you want everyone to be able to see your site, to discover what's on your website. With the amount of energy and time and heart and soul that we pour into our websites, why wouldn't we want everyone to be able to see it or access it, excuse me. Another business benefit, it increases the usability for everyone when your site is accessible. If I'm just a power keyboard user and your site is not keyboard accessible, then I'm probably not going to waste much time on your site. I'm going to move on to one that is. And of course, the absolute worst reason, but it's often the one that gets things done, is legal demand letters and lawsuits. They're going up, folks, and you need to make sure that your sites are accessible. So Lyndon, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some societal benefits of accessibility.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So some of the benefits that, you know, some people don't realize that are really around us in our everyday lives, like Sarah was talking about with captions, you know, and how captions were, you know, really meant for deaf people, but you know, now people use captions when they're on the train and they forget their headphones at home, you know, and because they're in a noisy environment. You know, you have things like audiobooks, right? Audiobooks were made for people who are blind, but now people use audiobooks when they're driving to work or they're on a long road trip. You know, you have things like dark modes in different apps, web apps and mobile apps. Those are really, you know, that really came from people who have low vision, like myself, who can benefit from those services. And now a lot of people benefit from that, especially like developers who are staring at a screen all day. One other benefit of accessibility and technology that we have is like Google Home and Siri and things like that primarily benefit people with mobility impairments, but can benefit really anyone who, you may have, your hands may be full with things and you may have to perform an action, but you can do it with your phone now, right? Or you can do it with Amazon Alexa or Google Home. So those are just some of the benefits that we came up with that are really in society that everyone benefits from. And it shows how accessibility goes from just, serving a niche population to serving everyone ultimately. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo here in a second. I'm going to get set up. And I just want you guys to know that there's going to be parts of the demo where I'm not going to share my screen, just so you can get the full impact of, what a screen reader user hears on a daily basis. And we're going to try to make this interactive. So Sarah's going to jump in and she's going to ask questions and things like that. We're going to use the raise hand tool and stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and get started. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will answer them as we go.
All right, so I gave you guys 3 pretty easy accessibility issues that you probably will see. And I know that I've got some accessibility people on here. So when Lyndon starts sharing this, he's gonna use JAWS. He's gonna tell you what keys he's pressing so that you know what he's doing on his end with JAWS. If you're working on a Mac computer, you would probably be testing a site with Chrome and VoiceOver. If you're working on Windows, you probably would be testing with JAWS and Internet Explorer or Chrome. Or you would also be testing with Firefox and NVDA, which is the free tool on Windows. But JAWS does have a 40-minute mode that's free. So while he gets started here, if you see an accessibility problem or you hear an accessibility problem, raise your hand.
Yep, sounds good. Okay. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
You can, Lyndon.
Okay, good.
Hands.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. Okay. So this site here was created by the W3C, the Web Accessibility Initiative group with the W3C. And basically, it shows a few different pages, has a home page, a news page, a tickets page, and a survey page. And it really tries to, mimic everyday issues that a screen reader user would find, right? And so this is really good because as a developer, you can go back to this resource after this talk and you can look at the annotations and you can see what the individual issues are that we're going to go over. And you can see code snippets and you can, get a feel for some of these issues that we're going to talk about here. So, okay, so basically I'm going to go through the homepage here, and it's pretty inaccessible. There's a lot of accessibility issues here. I think 10 or 12 different ones. And as we're going through, I'm going to let you know the keys that I'm pressing to navigate and what a typical screen reader user would use to navigate a page like this. So, so I'm currently on the page, so I'm going to press Alt+D. I'm going to go to the address bar at the top.
Alt-D, address search bar edit, link skip, type in text.
Okay, I'm going to press Tab.
Last voice name equals quote message voice quote grip. W3C logo link. W3 Web Accessibility Initiative left paren walk over inaccessible homepage report link. Show in a tick news link. Tickets link. Survey link.
So right now I'm just pressing Tab.
Red dot with a white letter
Okay,
C
now he's gotten to the actual page.
as well as the sun. This logo is followed by a black banner that says Citylights, which is the name of this online portal. Finally, the slogan of the portal, your access to the city, follows in a turquoise green handwriting style and with a slight slant across the top banner.
Anybody seeing any problems here? Raise your hand if you're seeing any problems. If you're hearing anything, there we go. we got one. Darren,
Okay.
I think I can allow you to talk.
Yep.
Darren, what do you see? Go ahead, unmute yourself. Or I can unmute you. Maybe not. I don't think Darren can. John C.
Okay, we can type in the chat.
Let's try John C. Can
Okay.
we hear John
Can you
C?
hear?
There he is.
Right. Cool.
John?
Well, the last thing I heard was what I assume was the alt for the whole image for city lights, your access to the city.
Mhm.
And extreme, it was overly descriptive of things that are clearly decorative.
Absolutely.
Sure. So John, how would you modify that? What kind of alt would you put on this image?
I guess I would say logo for city lights, your access to the city. And I have to think
Yep,
about that
yep.
because I know you can't get punctuation to read out. So
Yeah, city lights
So-
or access to the city logo would be very good.
Yep, that is good. Yep, good. Okay,
one other thing you mentioned,
go ahead.
as you're going across what appears to be the tabs, overview, home, and news, were you using
Sure.
the tab key on your keyboard?
Yes, I was. Mhm.
Okay, is that standard? Because I thought I just read recently with the tab set, you actually use the arrows within a tab set?
Yes. Yes.
Right, so
In this case, these are links.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
so
not,
these are links.
it looks it looks like a tab set, but it's not.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you would use arrow keys with a regular tab set. This is like a menu. I just skipped over the skip to demo link that was at the top. And yeah, so this is, so I'm just trying to use the tab key right now.
Lyndon, it might help. Let's scroll down so that people just see the page.
Okay.
There
So
we
this
go.
is the page. There's a few different issues here. And I'm gonna try to navigate a little bit and see if I can get around this. So I'm gonna press tab.
Combo box, quick menu dash greater. To change the selection, use the arrow keys.
So I already know because I've demoed this before that if you use the arrow keys, because it's a demo, it's going to take me to another page because it's not, this is just a demo site. So
Combo box.
So it's not, so I'm not going to do that, but I am going to, let's see, where did I go? I think I lost my focus now.
Alt E.
See?
Enter. Visited same red dot combo box. Quick menu dash greater. To combo box. Quick menu dash greater.
So it was still reading the combo box a few times there, right? I was just pressing tab. Normally, once you press tab off of something like that, it would go to the next interactive element, right? So maybe Sarah can talk a little bit about how she would fix that if there's a tab trap.
Well, that's a tab trap, and there could be lots of reasons for that. But what I would do is I would send focus from that element into the next tabbable element. So I would probably just use jQuery.focus method on that.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so now I'm going to press the letter H. I want to see if there's any headings on this page, right?
Wrapping to top. Inaccessible home page dash before and after demonstration heading level 1. Wrapping to top.
So when JAWS makes that noise, that means it's wrapped back to the top of the page. It told me that there was an H1 there, but it's not getting the H1, the headings that are down here, right? So that means they're not styled as headings. So I can't navigate by headings. Let's see if I can navigate.
Overview link.
It took me back up there.
W
Okay.
enter. Visited same red dot with a white letters combo box.
So now if I press tab, I'm able to, you can see the screen moving, right? But nothing, there's no focus. So if you're a keyboard only user and you have vision, you don't know where you are, right? There's no focus indicator there. So I can't navigate by headings. So that's not going to work. So let's see what kind of links are on the page. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And Sarah can watch this if you raise your hand or if you put it in the chat. If you notice that there's a link that's not descriptive, I want you to either raise your hand or put it in the chat when you hear it. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Alert. You have stopped screen share. Leaving menus.
Okay.
Welcome to City Alt E. Chrome Alt E. W3C logo link. Links list dialog. Links list view. C. Click here. 20 C. Click here. 25 of 55.
There, we've got some hands up.
26
All right, Homer, I know you know this. Go ahead, Homer.
Okay, go ahead.
Alert from John C.
So we're
Okay,
talking
go ahead.
about, well, first off, all I caught was the click here. The click here was definitely not descriptive because I have no idea why I'm clicking there. So it would be nice
Absolutely.
to
Perfect.
have some other copy in there to provide context for that link itself.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks, Homer.
yep. So basically what I did was I brought up a links list. I should have mentioned that. So I can do that by pressing Insert F7 with JAWS. It brings up a list of links on the page. And I may not want to tab through every link on the page. And like on here, there's no, headings to navigate by. So I can bring up a links list. I can, if there's a certain link I'm looking for, like contact us or something like that, right? That's pretty standard. I can typically find that much easier through this. So I'm in the links list. There's a few click here
Then
links.
why
There's
don't
a
you
few
share your
read more
screen and
links.
show the links list?
Sure,
Sorry.
I can do that. Yep. That's fine.
Task switching. Zoom participant ID colon. Select a window or an welcome to City Lights alert. You have started screen.
Okay. Can you see
John,
my
leaving
screen?
menus, real quick to answer John's question in the chat, leaving menus
Leaving menus.
is
Zip meeting. Welcome.
announcing because he's leaving a navigation region.
Yeah.
Links list dialog.
I don't know
Links
if you can
list.
see the.
Welcome meeting control. Zoom.
I'm gonna have to stop sharing because I shared the wrong window.
Alert. You have stopped screen share. Alert. From John C. Select a window or an application that you want to share.
I don't know if it's gonna let me share. I'd have to share my whole screen. No, I'd have to share my whole screen. Hold on.
Alert. You have started
Right.
Zoom. Welcome to City Lights.
Okay.
We're a little worried about how
Accessible
Jaws and Zoom
homepage.
are gonna,
Links list dialog.
you're gonna play well
Links list
together
C.
here.
Click here.
Okay, there we go. So if you can see my screen, you should be able to see the links list in JAWS. So you can see how, I can press different letters for the first letter of a link, and it'll take me to every link, with that letter. So I could press like R.
Read more ... 26 of.
And that's what a screen reader user is going to hear. They're going to hear just read more, no matter what text is next to it. That's what they're going to hear. It's not descriptive. There's no, additional text that's provided for screen reader users to know what they're reading more about, what they're clicking to learn more about. So
Exactly. So if you're say a busy mom and you happen to be blind or have low vision and you want to get onto that website and you want to just find that link real quick because man, I just need to know if school's open today. And you go through that link list and you hear click here, click here, click here, read more, read more, read more, read more. You're like, well, now I have to listen to the entire site. How annoying is that?
Right.
So common poor link text, click here, link more, learn more, continue, read more, all those things. If it doesn't tell you where that link goes, it's not good link text.
Right. Yep. Alrighty.
Escape.
Okay. So one other thing that screen reader users look for are, different images on the page, and if they add context to the content that they're surrounding, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, like what Sarah talked about earlier. Sometimes they're decorative and they just need a null attribute applied to them. So let's see if there's any images on this page. So I'm going to press G to navigate by graphic.
To get missing image descriptions, open the context img/nav home link graphic on mouse over. img/nav news link graphic on mouse over. Alert. img/nav fax link graphic on mouse over.
So it's reading, I think it's reading, I thought it was reading the one from the side.
img/nav survey link graphic on mouse over. Bullet graphic alert. From Benjamin Gray to all panelists, Colin.
Okay, so it was reading the chat that came through. Sometimes JAWS will do that, so I apologize.
Alert. From Sarah.
But so navigating by images is very important, because it can add context sometimes to what the text that's already there. So now I'm going to jump over to the accessible version.
Alt-E, skip W3, web accessibility, over
And while he's doing
accessible
that,
homepage link,
I
enter.
don't know if you can mute real quick.
Welcome to City.
While he's doing that, Ben had a question. Ben Davis had a question. How do we count for link text when our link is an image? Well, when your link is an image, the alt text is going to work as your link text.
Yep.
Now, if it's a graphic image that is not
Alert.
something that you would have alt text on, you might use an ARIA label. So if you have, let's say you have a magnifying glass indicating that that's a search field, that it opens a search, it's a button that opens a search, you might have button, and you might have you might have an ARIA label that says search.
Okay.
But
There's no other questions?
Real quick rule of thumb on ARIA, bad ARIA is worse than no ARIA at all. So when you are using any kind of ARIA, which we're going to give you some links to ARIA, which is the
Accessible rich internet application.
applications. It took me a second.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a link to that where you can see how to build accessible widgets using ARIA. Make sure you really understand it and make sure you're testing the pages after you use those things, because like I said, bad ARIA is way worse than having no ARIA at all.
Yep, that's true. Okay, so we're going to navigate through the accessible version of the homepage now.
Skip to accessible demo page, same page link, visit enter. Welcome to City Lights, left bracket, accessible home. Skip to content, left paren within demo page, right paren, same page link.
So give me a skip to content link, which Sarah mentioned earlier, right? So this is actually where the page would start, like on a normal page, right? So if I press this, it would take me to the main content. But I'm going to press tab. I want you to hear the alt text for this image that's here.
Skip to navigation, left paren within demo page, right paren, same page. Explore site by topic, colon combo box. Skip to explore site by topic, colon combo box.
Okay, that's not good. So it skipped it. But anyway, now you can see that there's, let me go back to the top real quick.
Skip to what city lights, colon your access to the city.
Amazing. So when Homer talked about that, or John talked about that earlier, and he said that's what he would put for the alt text, that's what they put for this image. So
explore site by topic, colon combo box.
If you notice now for the quick menu option, there's actually a go button now, right? So there's actually a way to submit it. Before there wasn't. So there's a go button there.
Go button.
It has focus, right? There's no tab trap, there's focus now. So a keyboard user knows where they are on the page.
Use link.
So now it's going down the
Tickets
side.
link. Survey link.
Okay, so now I can probably navigate by headings, right? So I can press H.
Welcome to City Lights, heading level 1.
Or some screen reader users do this. They press Insert F6. They bring up a list of headings.
Heading list dialog. Headings list view.
Right.
Navigate.
So it tells me what the heading is, tells me what level it is. I can even, if I just want to see all level 2 headings, I can change it to where it just shows me those, right? And these are in order right now. They're not alphabetical.
Welcome to City Light. Keep wait. Man gets
So,
9 months.
And if I wanted to go to one of these headings, I would just press enter and it would take me to that heading, right? So I can press enter here.
Enter. Heading level 2 link. Man gets 9 months in violin case.
Right. Let's see what the click here links from before look like. So if I press insert F7.
Links list dialog. Links list view. Man get violin, lat break, killer bees, onions, bites, onions, killer bees.
So the killer bees is what the click here was before, right? So if we scroll down, you can see the 2 click here links were killer bees and onions, right? So that's way more descriptive than click here. You don't know what you're clicking for. So that's another issue. Let's see if there's other images.
Selected. Alt-E. Skip Citylights, colon your access to the city. Sunny spells graphic. 3 penguins playing on stage graphic. Anemone dash snowdrop flower blooming graphic. Wrapping to top. Citylights.
So there are some images on the page. They do have some description to them, which can help with the context if you were to read through everything here. So is there a question?
What is the use case for links list and headings list dialogues? Then seems like you need to be able to read them. Okay, Dimitri, that's a good question. So Dimitri's asking what he's saying. Basically, screen readers are targeted primarily at visually impaired users. What's the use case for links lists and heading list dialogues? Then it seems like you need to be able to read them to benefit. Well, actually, will you pull up the headings list again, Lyndon?
Sure, yeah.
Heading
So
list
when you
dialog.
pull that dialogue up, focus goes into that dialogue, and he can actually just use his arrow keys up and
Navigation
down
menu.
and hear what those
Welcome.
are.
Heat
So
wavelength
he can
and
just
temperatures.
go
Colon
up and
2.
down that list, and he can hear, you know, that level 1. If he just wants to know what page he's on, just real quick, hey, what page am I on? He can find that level 1 heading really easily, just by pushing the number 1 or just scrolling up and down. And that gives him some context. Yeah, I'm on the right page, or, oh, oops, I went to the contact page and I meant to go to a different page entirely. So the dialogue is very easily navigable by someone with a visual impairment. They're very used to using them.
Sure. And it's just a quick reference, really. Just jump to it. It's easier to see as a whole what's on the page, and just easier to jump around. And if you accidentally go to the wrong page, you can press Insert T, and it'll read the title of the page. So that goes to having, you know, instead of having every single page on your site be the same title or non-descriptive titles, you know, it's good to have important, you know, descriptive page titles. Because if I do go to the wrong page and I look for that page title, it needs to be descriptive so I know where I am.
Did that answer your question, Dimitri?
Alert.
Mo, exactly. Visually impaired does not always mean that you can't see anything.
Alert.
That's true. Yep.
The majority of people with visual impairments actually do have some residual vision, and will use a Zoom browser, Zoom on their browser, that kind of thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Escape. So
that's this page. So I'm going to jump over to the, let's see. How's our time? Okay. I'm going to jump past the news page. It's just basically some articles with headings. We've already gone over headings. I'm going to jump to the tickets page. I believe there's a form there. I want to jump to that next.
While he's doing that, Johnson, you're right. Johnson posted in the chat. I almost feel like the heading list window is to help the developer or accessibility tester during testing and development. I use it all the time when I'm fixing websites. That's not the purpose, but it does definitely help you when you're going in and you're fixing things.
Yep. Okay.
Alert.
So I believe on this page there's probably some forms. So this is the inaccessible version of the tickets page, right? So I should be able to buy tickets on this page, hopefully.
Skip to skip enter. Same page, red dot with a white letter C. That's
combo
box. Quick H.
I can't navigate by headings.
Quick menu.
There's that tab trap.
Copyright link.
Yeah. So it jumped past.
Copyright link. Combo box. Quick menu dash.
Yeah, so there's a tab trap with that. This is just tables. These tables are okay. I think the only thing that they really change in this version, the accessible version, is the acronyms in the table column headers down here. They actually expand those. So I can just show that really quick. So these get expanded. This number here in this text is hard to read. So they'll change this too. It's pretty much it on this page. It's really not. I think maybe they change this from being all caps to regular, you know, like just regular text. We can switch over to that real quick.
Accessible tickets page. 4 headings and 46.
Look how much easier that is on your eyes to begin with. Just
yep.
as a
So like this is just so much easier. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then even this, right? See how much easier this is to read now? Not all caps and all that. So, all right. I'm going to jump over to the survey.
Survey link. Center line inaccessible survey.
Perfect. All right. So this.
Alt-E, address and search. Alt-E, Chrome.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. When you hear something that you think is an accessibility issue, I either want you to raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Alert. You have stopped screen share. Leaving menus. Welcome to City Alt E. So Alt E. Skipped W. Web accessibility. Accessible survey. Accessible show template link. Red dot combo box. Combo box. Quick menu. Table. Column 1. Row 3. Which is your favorite city
Oh, I
park?
found it.
Call 1 row 3. Radio button not checked. 1 of 6. Table. Column 1. Row 3. Combo box. Select a city dash 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 greater. To change the selection, use the arrow keys. To change the which Jurassic Park, which is your
Dimitri's
favorite
asking,
city
why did
park?
it skip
Call
right
1
to
row
row
3.
of the
Radio
table?
button not checked.
I'm sorry?
Dimitri's asking, why did it skip right to row 3 of the table?
So when I pressed tab, it was in the first question says, which is your favorite city park? That has radio buttons. So if it were check boxes, it would go to each checkbox because sometimes you can have multiple selections. When it's radio buttons, if you press tab, it takes you to the first one, but then you would use arrow keys to go through. I pressed tab again, and it went to the second question, which is talking about something different. But I went back up, so now I'm using arrow keys.
Radio button not checked. 2 of 6.
Do you see how it's saying radio button not checked, 2 of 6? What's the radio button label? I don't know, right? So.
None radio button not checked. None. Central Grand Park.
So it's not associating the button with its actual visible label. We'll show that here in a
Zoom
second.
participant ID colon 40 me. Select a
show
window
this
or an
again.
application. Welcome to City Lights. Alert. You
Okay.
have started.
So now you can see, basically what it was telling me is it was reading the radio button, but the label, right, the visible label that you can see is not tied to the, radio button itself. So Sarah, maybe you can,
Yeah, go ahead
maybe you can
and
share.
go ahead and go through and show them now while they can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, I can do that. Let's see. So I'm gonna go.
Alt E. Alt E.
That's it. Oh,
Leaving menu. Just meet. Welcome to City Light. Alt E. Chrome button menu.
yeah.
Alt E. Skip to enter. Red dot with a white combo box. Combo box. Which is your favorite city park? Call 1 row 3. Radio button not checked. 1 of 6.
Now, if I press
It never
tab, it's
says
gonna take
none.
me to
You
the.
don't even know your favorite city park.
Right.
Well, I don't have a favorite city park. You don't even know that you're checking that. And when
Right.
you go to the next one, it's gonna just say radio
Radio
button.
button not checked. 2 of 6.
But if you notice, it just says radio button not checked 2 of 6. It's not reading the question again, right?
Right.
No
So-
So
radio
what I
button
would
not
what I
checked.
would have done
3 of
here
6.
is I would have first of all labeled all these buttons and made sure that the label was associated either with an actual textual label, with a label for attribute. But I would also have an ARIA described by on the radio group so that when I go into that group, it reads me that question and I know that that is the question these are associated with, which my colleague Benjamin posted up in the chat.
Okay. So
Which
if I
is
press
your favorite
tab,
city park? Radio button not checked. Table. Column 1. Row 3. Combo box. Select a city dash 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 greater. To change the selection, use the arrow keys.
so I can do that, but it didn't tell me what the question was, right? So I need to know that to know how I'm going to answer this, regardless if I can get to the answers or not,
To change the selection, press up or down arrow. Do you want to receive a free newsletter? Call 1 row 3. Radio button not checked. 1 of 2.
So it read the question this time, what Sarah was just talking about, but it didn't tell me, what is this radio button that I'm on? I don't know, so
Radio button checked. 2 of 2. To change the selection.
it tells me when it's checked, but it still doesn't tell me what it is. Let's see if the next field reads.
Edit has pop-up. Type in text. Edit has pop-up. Type in text. Edit has pop-up. Type in text. Has pop-up. Submit button. To it.
So it didn't tell me the email address. It didn't tell me, like what to put in your name. it didn't tell me to retype my email, right? So trying to submit this form, there's definitely going to be errors, you know, and a lot of times I see, and I'm sure Sarah sees it as well, when you submit a form, if there's an error and you don't inform the screen reader user what the error is, it's going to take them much, much longer to try to do that correctly. And especially if you don't send their focus to either an error message above the form, which sometimes happens, or to the required field that they didn't complete correctly.
Right.
So, yep. And then below this is just the table.
With most of these, there are different techniques that you can use to solve these problems. I tend to be working with source code that's already written, and I'm writing JavaScript and jQuery to fix those things. But if you're in the actual source code, you can just make sure that you're using your native HTML elements. That'll fix a lot of these things. If you're using a legend and field set correctly, if you're using your native elements, your native inputs, and you're labeling them correctly with your label and your for, and you're matching your ID, then you're solving a lot of these form problems right there just by using native elements.
Yep. So I think now's a good time if there's any other questions before we transition to Jeff and his presentation. If there's any other questions, we could answer them now, I guess. It'd be a good time.
I'm going to post in the chat. I have a whole bunch of links and resources for people. I'm going to post here in the chat.
Alert.
And it's going to alert everyone through VoiceOver there. I've got some links. Go ahead and take a look at these when you get a chance. They're great resources. Of course, I threw Audio Eyes Help Marketplace in there. You're going to hear a little bit about that from Jeff. But the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, they are the certification, and they have a lot of great resources there. Can you demo reading through the table at the bottom of that page, Lyndon? You go ahead and demo that.
Yep, so I'd have to switch to the, of course, it's not going to work on this page, really. I mean, I could switch to the accessible version. Let's see what happens on this page.
7 columns and 3 rows. Column 1, row 1. Love it, hate it. Blank. Hate it. Blank. Lung. Pancreas. Spleen. Liver. Skin. Brain.
So it's not telling me that these are headers, right? It should tell me that. It didn't even, yeah, so it didn't even tell me that those are headers.
10.
I don't know what those numbers mean.
4.
Right?
1, 5, 6, 14, 1. Table end.
So, you know, apparently they don't have the
ouch. Agree. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. There's no way to tell what numbers, especially because there's blanks in there. There's no way, even if you were counting them and trying to figure it out, there's no way you could do it. So why don't you show the accessible version on that, Lyndon, real quick?
Okay. All right.
Alt A, Chrome, Alt A, W Web Overview link, accessible, Center. Center Light Survey Lab, rack 7 columns and 3 rows.
So now these have, if there's nothing there, there's a 0, right?
Lung.
Let's see.
Pancreas, spleen, liver, skin, brain. Hate it. 4.
There should be, let's see.
Hate of 4,104,010.
Nope, that didn't work. So I read the whole row. Needed to read the column header.
Hate it, love it.
So just, okay, that's not working.
4, 10, 4.
So one thing I will mention about JAWS is that when you get to tables and things like that, there are commands that you have to use like 2 or 3 fingers with, and, you know, to get it to work, and for some reason it's not working. But there is a way for it to read. It can read the whole row, it can read the whole column, and it can read either the row header or column header. But for some reason it's not working for me right now.
Do you want me to run it through one for them?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Do you need to stop sharing?
Yeah, I gotta
pull
up the screen.
Okay.
Hang on just a second. Let me go to the right. Was that tickets or survey?
It is survey, I believe. Yeah, survey.
Okay.
Right. Do you want me to stop sharing? You're going to take over?
Yes, please. And then I can share.
Mental alert.
Okay.
All right. Share my screen. What? Hang on one second. Now it's saying my system preferences don't want me to. Hang on. Sorry, guys. You know what?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not wanting me to share.
Okay.
That's annoying. We had not practiced that because we weren't expecting to need to go to voiceover. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
No, John, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You know what? I think I just got it. Can you see mine? Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Here we go. Let me turn on voiceover.
VoiceOver F link. Skip to accessible demo page. Link. Skip to accessible demo page.
Can you hear
Link.
voiceover?
Image. W3C logo. Link. Image.
Yep, we
Web
can hear
accessibility initiative. Way.
Okay.
Logo. Heading level 1 3 mission control. Cecilia Martinez to everyone. Participants. Yes. Button. Navigation. Visited. Select Mr. Email. Read. Submit. Button. Link. Copyright. Submit. Button. Horizontals. Heading level. What is your favorite plan? Column 1. Lung. Column 2. Row 2. Davis to everyone. You are currently on the text element. Inside of his pancreas. 10. Column 3. Spleen. 4. Column 4. You are row 3. Love it. Homework games to everyone. Yeah. You are currently on the text element. Mission control. Google Chrome. Downloads. Trash. 24 of 24. VoiceOver off.
Okay. So you heard
Yep, that worked
basically
for you.
everything on my desktop too. All right. Did everybody hear it okay?
Yep, I heard it.
I'm going to stop sharing.
A few comments in the chat about how quick it was, but I think that's pretty typical, right, for people actually using VoiceOver.
Oh, yeah,
It
yeah.
is. I use voiceover constantly, so I'm very used to hearing it. And actually, I'm probably one of the faster ones in my room. If I think Benjamin's in here, he sits in the same room as me. He can attest to that. I can hear it because I'm used to it.
Yeah, and even the speech rate that Jaws was talking at, I have to consciously turn that down so that people can understand what it's saying. If I listen to it at the rate that I would prefer, it would be much harder for people to understand.
Yeah. So, but what you probably noticed there, when I moved from one row to the next, it would say the number, and then it would say hate it or love it if I moved up and down, and then it would say the organ when I moved to the right and to the left. So basically you kind of remember what row you're in, and I'm going to switch down, is there a way to make it speak slower? Yes, there is. I can slow it down in my settings. I just wasn't expecting to share today, so I hadn't slowed it down in advance. But
and
no,
the thing goes with Jaws,
at the highest rate.
Yeah, and the same goes with Jaws. You can speed it up or slow it down either temporarily or permanently, either through the settings or through different keyboard commands.
Yeah. What is the difference in the way the accessible table was coded versus the inaccessible version? That's a really good question, Toby. So if you know what, let me see if I can share again real quick. So I'm going to go into DevTools here. And oops, wrong screen. So this is the accessible version here. And you can see that they have coded the table, they've got a caption, they have the table head with a table row, they have table header, they actually have an empty table header here. They have table headers for all of these headers, and then in your body, they have the table row, the first, we call these row headers. You have a table head here and it's scoped to the row. And then you have your TDs. And then you have the next row and you have your table header here. Those TH elements, those table header elements are vital to reading these tables correctly. Now you can remediate this. So if you come across a website and you can't touch the source code, or if you're building something and for whatever reason you're using divs or whatever, you can remediate this. You can use column headers and row headers as your role. You can put a role on it and scope it. But really, it's just best to use the native elements when you can. They're very highly accessible. Browsers are optimized for that. So if you look at, let's go to the inaccessible table. If you look at the inaccessible table here, we're going to just take a look. They've got the table. They actually put this as their first table data, and they've used paragraphs elements. And you laugh and say, oh, people don't do this. Yes, they do. They do this. People do this all the time. These should be the table headers. They're just table data elements, TDs. You've got your table row just made out of TDs. This makes no sense semantically, and therefore it makes no sense to a screen reader. I thought I saw another question, but I have to stop sharing because that's on the screen. Sorry, guys.
I think Benjamin asked a question about tables nested within tables.
Sometimes I see tables nested within tables. Is this okay for accessibility? This is not a great plan. Not a great plan at all. I've seen people make a table be there in like one table as their header, and then a separate table is all their data. And in that case, your table headers are not linking to your table data rows at all. Yeah, no, not a good idea. There are sometimes really rarely cases where you have a really, really complex table. If you have a really complex table, I would encourage you to be looking at the ARIA authoring practices on how to make sure that you're using your call spans correctly and making sure that everything is describing what it needs to describe correctly, because tables can be a real pain in the butt. Ask any low vision or blind user who's had to, go through chemistry class and read the periodic table that with it not being correctly coded. Tables can be rough. Homer, I see your tears. Yes, they are hard. They can be really hard to comprehend. So yeah, coding them correctly is vital. John C says on VoiceOver, if you use the VoiceOver keys plus command, right arrow, left arrow, you can select speaking rate, then VoiceOver. Yeah, you can change your rate of speech. I just hadn't, I just didn't think to, because I was not expecting to share. Any other questions for us? Awesome. It was great to
Sarah, Lyndon, thanks so much. Yeah, no, thank you guys both
Sure.
For setting the table for me.
Yeah.
So guys, hi, I'm Jeff Jones. I work with Sarah and Lyndon on a daily basis. I work with the engineering team at AudioEye. who is working every day to solve issues of accessibility for our clients who build digital properties. And we have over the last 10 years sort of developed a process that allows us to rapidly remediate websites for our clients. A lot of the knowledge that Sarah has gained over the last few years of being an engineer at AudioEye really come from guys like Lyndon teaching us how individuals with disabilities use assistive technology and how to do a better job of creating content so that everyone has the opportunity to engage with that content in a meaningful way. If this is your first experience ever hearing someone use a screen reader, and what you just heard from Lyndon and Sarah sounded odd and strange and confusing, that's not uncommon, right? The first time that you experience assistive technologies engaging with digital content, it is enlightening to learn exactly, even when the content appeared to be structured correctly on the page, just how difficult it is for assistive technologies to engage with that content. And the real reason for that is because we're having to go through an interpreter when we build web content in order to have the assistive technology engage with that web content. The way that assistive technologies work is assistive technologies are software that's written for an operating system. Every operating system has an accessibility API that is built into the operating system. They've been around since operating systems worked on green screens, on terminals. In fact, they worked very, very effectively when everything was a text-based output because it was easy for the screen reader to interpret the content that was on the page and announce it. It became one of synthesizing speech in the early days of creating the technology. But over time, the Windows desktop, right, the visual interface has become far more robust, bringing more people to, personal computers. And we see that the accessibility API has had to play catch up to keep up with the interfaces that we are building. When you're building a desktop website or you're building a desktop application, you are using the operating system's own constructs to build that content. When you're building a website, you're using open source constructs that a browser is capable of interpreting and building a visual display and presenting that to the end user for their consumption and their interaction. But the browser is interpreting that content for the accessibility API so that the operating system can pass that information along to the assistive technology. It's that interpretation of the DOM, right, of the document object that really allows for either success with the accessibility APIs or failure with the accessibility APIs. But whether you are using a screen reader, whether you're using a eye tracking device, or you're breathing through a straw to control a pointer on the screen, or you're a single key typist that is using a wand to type on a keyboard, every one of those users is engaging with the content through the accessibility APIs in order to have a meaningful experience. If you don't support keyboard focus on every element that exists within your web page, the keyboard-only user isn't going to be able to have a meaningful engagement with that content. Well, the keyboard-only user in this experience is also a screen reader user, because a screen reader user who is blind and has no vision wouldn't be moving a mouse around to make sure that they know where something is pointing on the page when they engage with it. They're going to rely on the tab keys and the arrow keys and focus indicators to be announced when they land on elements, and for every element to have a proper label as you move through the system. But in the same way, if you're solely focused on that keyboard user and to engage a button on the page wouldn't support a mouse click because you've got a non-standard control and you've required a key press event on there, then our example of someone who's using an eye tracking device to move a cursor on the page would expect more of that mouse behavior and you would be denying them access through a non-standard control that required keyboard access. So what we look to do really is to build a semantic web when we are creating content, because a semantic web, one that can be interpreted by its components, is easier for the browser, all browsers, to translate for the accessibility API, any accessibility API. So a semantic web is a more accessible web, but it's not necessarily the modern web. And so we recognize that the modern web really is built of JavaScript frameworks, it's built of CMS platforms, it's built of user-driven actions that doesn't necessarily mimic a semantic environment. And so we've got to program for accessibility and create accessible content, knowing that we're going to have these rich experiences moving forward. And we've got to figure out the best way to make these rich experiences easily interpreted by the accessibility API. That's actually where IBM stepped in half a dozen, almost now, I guess, 10 years ago, right? And started to introduce the concept of ARIA as an open source library that all of the browsers have supported, that allow us to use a more rich attributing system, right? Attributing system as we're creating this content. So ARIA allows us to take a div or a span that has been used to build a dynamic web component and start to define that in terms of attributes that can be interpreted by the accessibility APIs that are built into these operating systems. So when we look at creating a semantic web and then augmenting that with ARIA, we really can start to empower developers to create these rich internet applications, but still do so in a way that can have a broad reach to all audiences. And we can do so in a standards-based way that really allows us to focus on the communication between the browser and the accessibility API, rather than having to get concerned about how that accessibility API is going to translate that information for the variety of output devices that assist users in engaging with the content. So we have developed a service, and by no means is this a sales pitch of AudioEye. What I'm going to show you tonight is our technology that we offer freely to all engineers to come in and to utilize to better understand when content is inaccessible and to help them create accessible content, or at a minimum to help them understand how to structure that content when they're creating it so that it is accessible. So I'm gonna log into the AudioEye platform. If you've never been to our website before, what we offer to our clients is a JavaScript include. You can embed this in a position in your website, and what it will allow us to do is show you issues of inaccessibility on your website, and potentially leveraging our technology, help you solve some of those issues of accessibility that are present on your website. And the goal is really to make it very easy for someone with, a decent understanding of JavaScript to really come in and be able to understand accessibility in a way that allows them to start solving problems. So the way it works, right, is you can just come in and you can enter your URL and your email address right here on our website. What we will do is provision a JavaScript tag for you. You can then go and install that JavaScript tag in your website, and it will unlock a series of tools for you. Now, all of this is a free service. You can come get it online. We have clients who take our service as a managed service where we do all of this work for them. But the tools we make available to all of our clients, once you've signed in and registered on the site, you can come in and log in, and you'll be given access to our developers' tools. And I'll show you how to sort of use those on a website. One, to help you sort of identify some of these problems, right? These things that Lyndon was pointing out, you need to be able to be aware of them as you're creating content. So we need to have a tool that allows us to understand where these inaccessible issues are showing up in our web content. But then we also want to make sure that we understand how we can go about fixing those issues as well. There are a variety of testing tools out there. If you're familiar with accessibility, you may be familiar with tools that exist out there. The W3C actually supports a tool from the WebAIM called Wave. Wave is a browser plugin that'll test a single page for your system. Ours is a service that will do very similar to that, but we're going to integrate into Chrome's developer tools as well. So, as I sign up for a free account, I'm presented with the JavaScript tag that I can include in my website, but I'm also then presented with a series of tools that will make it easier for me to understand these issues of accessibility that might be present on our website. Once I come in for the first time to download our tools, the very first time you come in, you'll be prompted, if you're on a Chrome browser, to install our Chrome extension. Really is the easiest way for you to utilize our testing tools on your web content, and then you can come in and use them. But this will be an interface that will drive you there. And then once you've activated the tools or you've downloaded our extension, that will become a link that will just simply drive you to your website and activate our tools on your website. So this is a demo site from Squarespace that I have set up just to sort of run through some basic demonstrations of how to leverage our tools. One of the interesting things about creating content on a CMS platform is, depending on the platform, you have varying degrees of true access to the underlying content as you're building. Oftentimes, you are restricted by the rules of the CMS platform as you're creating content. And we as JavaScript developers, and I'm a dinosaur JavaScript developer to be fair, we have some ability to come in and control this content based on really how open the platform is to allowing JavaScript to be installed. Squarespace is a pretty good site for allowing freeform JavaScript to be installed. We'll be able to come in and do some analysis and remediation. So I'm going to log in again to our product. If you have our JavaScript on your website, you've got to authenticate yourself to gain access to the tools from our website. We really have two basic components of our system. Something that we call our simple analysis tool, which is really designed for a layman, right? If you're not an engineer and you want to just get some basic understanding of accessibility, our simple analysis tool will point out things like images that are missing alt text that you can go in and easily fix yourself. If we recognize iframes that are pretty simple to display on the page and they're missing a title, we can describe those. I'm gonna step through that because, quite honestly, anyone who builds websites and is a JavaScript engineer really is going to be looking for the advanced version of our tool. This is where you're going to get real insights into accessibility. One of the things that you will need to know about accessibility, though, is depending on who you are dealing with, you'll have a couple of different requirements for the way you want to go about testing sites for accessibility. Now, the truth is, internationally, we're sort of coalescing around what the W3C publishes as testing standards, which is currently now WCAG's 2.1 standards. A lot of our clients, and really, the 2019 standard and the transition in 2020 will be going from 2.0 to 2.1. So we still support both of those. If you're doing a lot of work, though, for the federal government or for someone who is building content for the federal government, you're really going to want to run the Section 508 testing standards. There's a lot of compatibility between the two, and you will solve accessibility for the majority of users, either path you take. But one will be focused on a government standard, one more focused on an international standard. If you really want to get in there and test for everything that we have ever written a test for, you can come in and choose WCAG 2.1 AAA standards. That is an all-encompassing test of our platform. But for most people, we will probably choose one of these three options. I'm going to run a simple WCAG 2.0 test for you real quick so that we can go through and kind of see the results. This is really where you as engineers can begin to look at the content that's on your page or that's on a CMS platform page that you've constructed and get a sense of where the accessibility issues lie. What we try to do in our board of tiles across the top here is really help you triage issues of accessibility. We start with the most critical. These are errors. Errors are really things that computer automation is 100% perfect at identifying the issue of accessibility. So we know that if we have limited time to solve accessibility issues, the first place we should start is to start with errors, because we know they need to be fixed. We know they create accessibility issues for our clients. And I'll get into an error and kind of how to go about solving it with all of the technology and better understand them. But I'll walk through this very briefly as we sort of understand how to manage accessibility. Risks are another area where we're really looking at things that computer automation does a pretty good job of understanding where these accessibility issues exist in content, but it's not perfect, right? This is where we can find false positives. But when you're dealing with accessibility issues, it's better to be aware of the potential false positives and have a concept of what they are, and at least think through the issues and kind of manage them or mitigate them. Some risks need to be fixed. Others just need to be verified as being a non-issue. So one of the things you can do with the risk is you can send it and you can qualify it as a non-issue after you've tested it, and it'll go away from consideration in subsequent tests as long as it remains in the same position on the web page. So the idea is remove the errors, manage the risks. We're going to give you some items to review. These are areas where, you know, Lyndon spends his days helping us test websites for our clients. He knows what to review when he comes across these interfaces. Our review section is really designed to help a more novice user think about certain things that they should be doing on the page. For example, right, we found some images where it looks like there might be text within those images. That's not best practices we had already sort of seen with the logo in the example they've shown. Just simply hitting Command+ on your web page, right, and zoom 4 times up to a 200% font. Make sure your divs and spans aren't collapsing on each other, right? We want to review these things. When we talk about fixing issues, so that's what we do with review, right? We go through and we review those items. When we move on to source fixes, when we talk about fixing issues of accessibility with JavaScript, which is what AudioEye engineers do all day long for our clients, we write JavaScript targeting functions to remediate issues of accessibility. It's not always a good idea to do that when the content is going to change on the page. You may be aware of the flicker of unstyled content, right? When you use JavaScript to change something on the page shortly after it has been set, it will flicker. And that flicker is perceivable to most visual consumers of content, and it's an unappealing experience. So when we see things that need a visual consideration, right? Small font potentially, a link that is using color only, right? Something that will be written as a link, or contrast ratios that are too low. We really recommend you fix those at the source rather than fixing them with JavaScript. Fix them with CSS so that they get applied at the time of loading. We also, though, we want to focus on the things that are being done well. And Square, like a lot of CMS platforms, does a lot of work to make their content accessible out of the box. And so we want to be mindful of those as well as we go through the system, of the things that are constructed correctly. So it's not just a tool to tell you everything that's wrong. It's also going to tell you where the things are done correctly on the page as well. Again, if we go through and manage the site, these verifications will show up. If we see content in there, we're able to, you know, move the risks and the review items into verified items or fixed items if we are leveraging the AudioEye technology to fix items on the page. And so part of what our JavaScript can do is help fix these issues of accessibility. And the way we do that is by either connecting to what we call our automatic remediations, things that we can just fix automatically, right? Certain issues of accessibility, if they exist on a website, they can be automatically fixed. Social iconography is a real prime example of that, right? If you think about the social toolbar that exists on almost every website, it is made up of icons that are provided by the social networks. Those icons alone don't actually even allow you to put alternative text within the iconography on the page. We need to come up with another mechanism to do that. Well, we can leverage ARIO, or we can leverage hidden off-screen text that's deployed in line that can announce the action that would be taken when someone engages with those social networking links. We can fix those automatically through JavaScript. But the way that we go about fixing those is by targeting elements in the DOM and writing small JavaScript functions to remediate these issues of accessibility. And that's really where JavaScript engineers can have a lot of power in solving issues of accessibility, is in understanding the power that created all of this inaccessible content, and the jQueries and the Angulars who have created systems now that are more accessible as they create content. But if you think about these rich JavaScript applications that are causing content to become more and more inaccessible, you can actually leverage the same technology that created the problem to solve the problem. And that's really what we advocate for at AudioEye, is to say, if you can fix these issues of accessibility, fix these issues of accessibility. If they're best fixed at the source, fix them at the source. But if you can't get to that source content, recognize that you as a JavaScript engineer have a lot of power through DOM manipulation to begin to solve problems and make a better experience, even when you're using a third-party feature, right, or third-party plugin on your website. You can go in, even without access to the underlying code, and take advantage of JavaScript to do some dynamic targeting of elements and enhance the accessibility by adding attributes to those elements. So let me go through a demonstration of how we remediate content. After we've sort of understood the problem, now we really want to go in and start to solve the problem, right? So in this case, this is actually an example, I think, that came in from earlier in the chat, right? How do we handle a button that has no visible text? Well, let me real quick, so that I can unlock all of our tools. I'm going to go open up our developer JavaScript, or Chrome's JavaScript developer console, right? So I'm going to, part of our technology is to, through our JavaScript plugin, you not only get access to run our tools directly from your website, right? So when you're on the website, you can just log in directly through the tool. But we'll also give you what we call our remediation tool within the platform as well. And the remediation tool, or the remediation builder, will actually let you come in and fix these issues directly from your website if our JavaScript is installed in sort of a point and click kind of interaction, right? So let me show you how it works. In this case, I've got a button, right, we have detected there's a button with no visible content. I can look pretty quickly here and see, okay, look, I can look at this class and start to make a guess about what this button is, right? I think we all probably can, right? This is an icon. It is a hamburger menu that's going to show up only on mobile, that is controlled by a data controller that will be hidden or shown depending on where we exist on the page. This is examples of where content management systems will give you everything all at once and selectively show and hide things in conceivably non-standard ways that would allow these to still be heard or picked up by a screen reader, even though they're not visible on the page. So what I can do is I can click the Fix button down here, and it'll show me exactly on the page where this item is, and I can kind of stack through the dev tree and start to open this up and show this menu icon on the page. But what it will also do with our tools is it will allow us to begin to propose a couple of different solutions here. Right now, in this case, it's going to look at the element and it's going to say, yeah, listen, we know this is the menu, right? We know this is navigation. We see mobile menu bar. You might be able to solve this with an ARIA role that would announce it as navigation, and that probably would solve the problem. I'm a little more old school in solving that. Like, that to me is a pretty risky way to solve the problem. While it would solve the problem, it could become fragile if there are other nav regions ever added to the page. Now, that assumes you know to add nav regions to the page, but it could be, right? There's another way to do it, right? Which is to say, let's put an ARIA label on this. ARIA, again, you know, this attributing system. An ARIA attribute is just like a data attribute inside of any HTML element. It will just always be prefixed by the string ARIA. So ARIA dash label really would then, whatever, that would be the key of an attribute inside of an input or button, and whatever that label was would be akin to creating a visible label on the page and associating a for attribute with it. But it would give you the ability to tell the screen reader, this is a label for this element, so treat it as a properly labeled element when you are announcing through a screen reader. So an ARIA label, now that it's got broad browser support, really becomes a prime way to solve this button issue, right? I can put an ARIA label on this element to solve it. Now the key becomes, if I have access to the original code base, all right, I can go in there when I created this button and I can add an ARIA label to it, right? And I can solve that problem. But if I don't have access to the code base, another way I can go about doing this is creating a JavaScript targeted selector, right? Where I use a CSS selector to target this element and to add the appropriate ARIA label after the page has rendered, but as the page is being rendered, execute this JavaScript function. So one of the things we need to do is properly construct a selector. And this is really where JavaScript has changed in the last 5 years from when I went to a more management role than a development role, right? What you guys can do with JavaScript now and CSS selector targeting really spans beyond what we were doing in the early days of jQuery, really when I was an engineer writing JavaScript on a daily basis. So one of the things that's sort of hard for me is building this selector, right? I want to find a selector that I know will only target one element on the page. I want to make sure I'm always targeting the correct element, right? So the first part of our tool really is, it gives me the ability, by parsing the DOM tree, the ability to build a selector that can be used to effectively target this element every time the page loads and apply this ARIA label to it, right? So in this case, I know it's my main menu. I know it's my mobile menu. I could call it a hamburger menu if I wanted to. I could call it a main menu if I wanted to. But main menu probably in this case is a better term than hamburger menu, because again, hamburger implies you have visually seen a stacked menu before on mobile and you understand the lingo of a developer, right? Better to probably call out exactly what it is. So what I can do now, right, is I've targeted my element, and I can't type and talk at the same time, right? So I'll never get the label right as I'm talking. But what I can do now is I can see how this will impact the site, right? So if I really do want to go back and fix this at the source, and I just needed to understand how to fix it, well, now I've been guided to that fix here, right? So I can see that what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an ARIA dash label to that element. I can also see that if I do have the AudioEye JavaScript deployed, I can kind of see what it's going to do to the page, right? How it's going to change the page on my behalf if I decide to save this remediation, right? So I can either use this tool to understand how to build a selector to target the element, to put an ARIA label on it and see what it'll look like. I can easily copy and paste that source out of it, or I can look at the source that we would use to target this element, right? So this is exactly the function that this tool just wrote that will be deployed to this website. Now, we use a scope and an outer find component. That really is just bound to our JavaScript, so that if we are remediating this using the AudioEye JavaScript technology, we know we won't collide with other prototype jQuery selectors that might exist out there, right? We are under the hood using jQuery in a lot of places to deliver this type of functionality, but it's going to be either namespaced or it's going to be scoped within the constructs of our functionality. But for those of you that are familiar with jQuery, I could take that element right there and replace it with $, and apply that on a document ready function. And when the page loads and the document ready event fires, this button will get an ARIA label attribute applied to it, and it will apply that fast enough that if that's the second thing on the page, it will have applied it before the screen reader gets to it. And by definition, it will not be the first thing on the page, because the title will be read whether it exists and is meaningful or not. It will attempt to announce the title on the page. So you can take this technology right here and begin to fix things right through this JavaScript targeting functionality, or I can save it and create a remediation within our system, and it'll ultimately publish this remediation and run it through a global CDN network and make it available to anyone who visits my test website within the next hour. So that's sort of the way that our technology works, right? Like, we're targeting these elements, we're creating these remediations. This remediation library then gets deployed whenever we hit a page with our JavaScript on it. We're able to look at that page and see any of these targeting rules that we have that would apply to the page. One of the other things we're able to do is, once we have all of these targeting rules applied to the page, you're actually able to come into the same JavaScript developer tool and see other remediations that have been written in the past for you, right, or that you've written in the past. You're able to track those, or you're able to come in and turn on a timing tool so that if you turn off the remediation builder and rerun this tool, it'll show you the real-time timing effects of not only our JavaScript, but if you really wanted to, you could look at all the transient JavaScript as well, right? So you could see how everything impacts the timing on the page. Because again, what we want to be mindful of as we're creating these remediations, and we really look at the modern web, we want to be mindful of the fact that we don't always have access to the underlying content. We may not have the ability to get in to that mobile hamburger menu on a Shopify website or a Wix website or a third-party plugin that we're using as a carousel to make those changes, because it's being delivered through a JavaScript tag itself. But if we look at that final rendered content and we leverage a testing tool like the AudioEye testing tool or the Wave testing tool, or look, in fairness, if you haven't used Google's Lighthouse testing tool, right, that is built into the Chrome developer tools, they're not going to give you quite as much information around accessibility. But again, it's a good start, right? Anything you do to improve your understanding of accessibility will make you a better engineer as you're creating content. But leveraging a tool to understand the problem is a great start. Then leveraging the tool that you possess, which is a strong skill in JavaScript, to really begin to manipulate the DOM and to shape it to your will, right? When you start thinking about shaping that DOM for accessibility, you realize just how powerful you can become in solving real world problems for the visitors of your websites. And so, you know, whether you go about solving them at the source, whether you go about using, you know, AudioEye technology or not to solve the problems, or whether you know clients who you want to hand off to an AudioEye engineer or salesperson to say, please help me solve accessibility on my website. The key is to really start thinking about it and to recognize just how cumbersome it can be for guys like Lyndon who really do rely on this technology to work the way that it should for them. Our job as engineers is really to understand what they're doing, how they're using technology, and to begin to ensure that when we create content, we're doing so with best practices in mind. The good news is those best practices are defined by the W3C. They are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and you can use a variety of tools to test for these issues. And if you want to leverage your engineering skills to solve these issues, we're gonna provide you some tools as well to be able to do that. So with that, I thank everybody for their time. Happy to answer any questions, but I know we're kind of running up against the end. But certainly I'll pause here and see if anybody's got questions about the technology and how it works.
All right. It doesn't look like we have any questions. If anybody has a question, maybe you can raise your hand. Okay, awesome. Cool. Well, thank you all. I guess the three of you for presenting tonight. I think it was a pretty good shot the first time that we tried to do this virtual meetup, and I think it's kind of extra special in a way that the topic was accessibility. So it kind of we were able to kind of layer it on a little bit more effectively. This in this format. So I guess just a couple of closing slides. Events happening. Refactor Tech was rescheduled. I'm sure they'll be tweeting out about that. Render, as far as I know, is still on for May 4th through the 6th. However, it's possible that might get rescheduled as well.
Yeah, that's been rescheduled for August.
It has been rescheduled. Okay, cool. Thanks, Cecilia. And then I guess other meetups. So React is one that we always kind of recommend, as is the Angular meetup. And then another community event that we have coming up is Drupal Camp. They as well, I believe, are likely going to reschedule, but they're still looking for CFPs from folks. So they've also thought about potentially doing something virtual as well. So we'll see kind of how that goes. Opportunities. So folks that are looking to hire, we were contacted by the folks over at Charity Vest, and they are a pretty neat startup that is fairly new, just raised some seed funding, and is making it easier for people to maximize the tax benefits of making charitable contributions. So they're looking for some full stack engineers. Definitely check them out. Sava Group is also hiring, as is Cypress. So these are all wonderful groups and companies to join. Great teams. Definitely check them out. And if you have opportunities at your company, definitely post them on our job board. As well as if you're looking, definitely check out that job board. Let's see here. Next up, just follow us on Twitter because you want to hear everything that we have to say, I'm sure. And then speakers, if you're interested in speaking, Rachel is down to help either critique, provide some constructive criticism, or ample praise for your talks. And then last but not least, my favorite slide, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. Everybody here that shared something is nothing less. Everybody that heard it is something more. So if you want to get involved, definitely let us know. Really, any way that you want to help out, definitely hit us up on Twitter or shoot me an email. Shoot us an email at present@atlantajavascript.com. So with that, I will say thank you all again for joining us for our first sort of virtual meetup, and definitely stay safe out there. And we'll see you hopefully next month. Perhaps in this format again. So thank you all so much for coming out tonight.